This is Marc Tobias with Greg Marsh at Keyme in New York City. And Greg, you're the CEO of a company that's been around for how long?
About 5 years.
And you guys figured out how to make key kiosks for the consumers that are in 1,500 plus locations now across the country. You designed the kiosks, you got together with engineers and are doing robotics and all kinds of optical recognition to make keys. So first of all, tell me quickly how'd you come up with the idea?
Yeah, sure. So I had moved to New York about 5 years ago, and shortly after moving here, my wife got locked out in New York City and had a horrible experience. She called the emergency locksmith. It's late at night. The guy showed up and charged a couple $100 to basically drill the lock. And I thought that was a really poor experience and could be improved. And so really wanted to come up with a better way to solve lockouts, and then ultimately that turned into better key duplication services as well. So I've been up with some amazing engineers and we started building.
So you are producing a machine now that is in drugstores, supermarkets, all kinds of places, that allow the consumer to insert a number of common keys and some high security keys by a couple different major companies in the United States. Some of the keys you cut on site in the machine. A lot of them you cut here at the office. And do you have like a certified locksmith that works for you here in New York? How do you do that?
Yeah, so our goal is to support as many key types as we can. So the kiosk physically inventory is the most common key types, and those will come out at the kiosk.
Right.
For less common keys or more sophisticated keys, the customer would place the order at the kiosk, and we will cut it and ship it to the customer.
Okay.
And so we have a team of key cutter and order fulfillment team, and we don't have any locksmiths on staff, although we've consulted pretty significantly over the course of the company with experts to learn how to do what we're doing.
So how accurate is your system?
Yeah, it's very accurate. So we believe, based on data from Hillman, that the manual key duplication error rate at a big box store using traditional equipment is typically 15%. And so we bring that down currently to low single digits, and our goal is really to get that to sub 1% in the next year or so here.
Of course, the problem is that if that error rate is correct, that's based on a lot of variables, including worn keys. You're not code cutting keys. And so that error rate may not be the fault of the locksmith. There's a lot of criteria that go into that.
Sure.
Of course, the problem is that the consumer doesn't know when he leaves the lock shop whether the key's going to work or not. Doesn't know with you guys either. And you're doing everything optically in your key machine. It's not a traditional key machine that actually physically, mechanically traces one key, your target key, to a blank key.
That's correct.
So you have some interpolation and translation that you have to do to decode that key. What kind of customer feedback have you had? People like you, not like you? What's the satisfaction rate? Do you have any metrics?
Yeah, so it's been very positive. We, at this point, have made millions of keys. The primary way that customers are rating us is on Google Maps. Our Google Maps rating, 96% of our ratings are between 4 and 5 stars. If there ever is an issue, we have an in-house customer service team. They sit right next to me in our office and headquarters, and we bend over backwards to make that situation right.
Right.
So yeah, overall we've made a lot of people happy, and our goal is to be the best way to copy keys for consumers, and especially when someone uses the lockout part of the service, where if they don't have a key, they can go to the kiosk, log in, and print out that spare key without the original, instead of calling a guy and having them drill their lock for a couple $100. That is so distinctly superior to how people have solved this problem historically that we see customers really go nuts in a positive way when that happens.
Yeah, but you don't have enough market penetration with your machines. If I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and in South Dakota. If I lose my key, you're not going to help me because you don't have enough machines.
Sure. There's certainly parts of the country that we don't have high penetration rates in yet, but growing quickly, and We're in 44 states right now and growing rapidly.
And have you had any licensing problems in any states? Has anybody bothered you?
Nope.
What's the security? First of all, when you send a key or a key fob in the mail, you're decoding that. Are you cutting those by code here, or do you know?
So we, part of the core technology is using artificial intelligence to help make those classification decisions. Sometimes we'll code cut and sometimes we will not. And the AI is making that determination.
Okay, and what do you do with that information as far as storing it?
Yeah, so if you do not choose to store your key, that information is purged. If you do choose to store your key, we will store geometric information about your key that would let us reproduce it.
Okay.
And then we do not store any personal information, which could link your key data to a location or a lock. So for example, if we're shipping you a key in the mail, as soon as that order is shipped, your address is purged. We intentionally do not store any credit card information, so we don't know where you live and we don't want to know that information.
So there's no way you can help law enforcement?
No, so we despite not storing that information, we still have ways to create accountability in this space. So we believe historically there's been absolutely no control around key duplication aside from the high security segment, and no accountability. So when you look at the vast majority of keys that are made, in a Home Depot, a Walmart, an Ace Hardware, a mom and pop locksmith, they have no record of who is making the keys. They have no record of what keys they are making. And so there's complete anonymity with key duplication. For the first time ever, Keyme actually knows which keys it's making, and we have ways to create accountability. So although we are not storing your credit card information, our credit card processor, which is Stripe, which is a leading credit card processor, we have an anonymous token that can identify you via Stripe. So we don't want to store your credit information, but we still have a
there's
paper trail.
All kinds of PCI standards as far as why you don't want to store that information.
Exactly, yeah.
But if you're not keeping my address, because when I went to some of your kiosks and had keys duplicated, I used a fictitious name. I used a debit credit card from Amex that I paid cash for with no accountability, which is a big problem in the United States for cell phones for criminal element. So what does that do for your company and for law enforcement if they want to track back that I made a key? Let's say there's a homicide in a building and they suspect that somebody had a key and there's a Keyme machine down the block, and the cleaning guy had access, what I can invent a scenario. But what if I want to trace that back? How are they going to do that?
Yeah, so clearly there are ways to try and skirt the level of accountability that we have. If that happens, then we are just as good as a regular key duplicator. So no one else has this information. There are ways to try and avoid, the methods of accountability that we have. And so some would be really difficult. So for example, we could see the transaction timestamp from the kiosk, and we could work with our retailer to see their in-store closed circuit TV. So there's things that would be even more difficult to surpass, but even if we didn't have any of that information, then all of a sudden we're just on the same playing field as every other key duplicator out there. So this is a space, I think it's so important to look at the existing key duplicators. There's just absolutely no accountability and control for the vast majority of keys that are being made.
Well, for the low security keys. For high security keys, that's not true.
Yeah, exactly, right. But that's 99+% of the market.
And you are duplicating some high security keys that the patents have expired.
Correct.
Are you taking any extra safeguards in doing that? Given that you don't have to, because the patents have expired.
Yeah, so the high security key method of fulfillment benefits from all the existing security processes that I just talked about in terms of accountability and control. And I would argue pretty strongly that in many ways those exceed even the unpatented higher tier of security that some of these lock manufacturers have. So, you know, physically presenting an ID card to a locksmith to be able to make a high security key, how much real security does that actually create versus actually, you know, truly with us, unless you go through extreme you know, precautions to try and avoid some of this anonymity, and some of which would be very difficult, like the video.
Right.
You know, so I think we're actually better than even many of those high security procedures to try and create control and key duplication. That's for, you know, high security keys, but we're applying that to all keys that we make.
Okay, so you have fingerprint readers in your machines if I want to store my keys. However, when I've used those, I've had about a 50% success rate in your reading my fingerprint, especially from one machine to another. Now, which means that you have a database of that data here at your headquarters in New York. Theoretically, I can go to any key machine, use my fingerprint that I used, and you should be able to bring that up. Is that correct?
So we are storing fingerprint minutia, which, so our problem with fingerprints is different from, say, a law enforcement agency. So for example, when you are logging into an account, we are matching what fingerprint is being scanned at that time of login versus the known fingerprint minutia that we have. So we don't, which is a much different challenge and problem than trying to say, hey, does this fingerprint match a database of tens of millions of people? And there's a lot of benefits to that as well. We again are limiting the amount of information that we are storing there to create a very secure login method that does not have us storing any unnecessary personal information.
Okay, so basically the consumer, they can either log in, because when it wouldn't when your system wouldn't recognize my fingerprint, I just re-logged in with my username and password that I had set up, and that's how you brought it up. So
correct. So the default, if you do not have a fingerprint, or if your fingerprint is not working for some reason, the default is to use a username and alphanumeric password, and then reset up the fingerprint.
So, and you have the capability of cutting not only traditional keys like Schlage, Kwikset, those are the most two common in America, that probably the vast majority of people use. You can also do the low frequency key fobs, and you can do some car keys.
Correct.
And how are you doing the car keys, the key fobs?
Technically, or
how are you? First of all, is that much of a percentage of your business?
It is a minority, but growing pretty rapidly.
And so you can supply the physical component of the key as well as a key fob. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
But for a very limited number of vehicles.
We support a good range, but obviously that support would decline with more recent makes and models that have more sophisticated types of transponders. Yeah.
Right. And so are you limited in your technology as far as your machines being able to read those transponder codes and then transmitting them to your headquarters here to replicate those?
Limited in terms of the types of
the
makes and
range
models,
of what you can do.
Yeah, certainly. So we, our goal again is to copy as many different types of keys that we can support. And so within the vehicle space, we want to be as helpful to customers as possible and have the broadest coverage as possible. So we're, we currently support a pretty large portion of the vehicle market, but certainly not all. And that coverage, as I said, declines with more recent makes and models that have much more sophisticated transponder and access types. But we have a very strong coverage with the existing kiosks.
What's your price comparison with locksmiths as far as keys?
Yeah, generally, so for vehicle and lockouts is typically where we end up being less expensive significantly. So for example, we charge single-digit dollars for a lockout key, very similar to a duplication, and that would compare to $150, $200 on average for an emergency locksmith to come in and drill your lock. On vehicle keys, instead of paying $200, $300, $400 at the dealership, we are anywhere from $20 to about $90 on vehicle keys. So really significantly saving our customers a lot of money, as well as making that point of sale substantially more convenient.
So the takeaway for consumers is that rather than going down to their locksmith, they can go to the grocery store, make key duplicates, and the vast majority, your failure rate is low. So the vast majority of them will probably work when they get home. They can pay for it on the spot. It's price competitive, and there's no security issue in capturing who they are. You take their pictures. What do you do with those?
Yeah, so we have in the store, there's obviously closed circuit television.
Yeah, but what about your machine?
Yeah, so we have cameras all over the machine. We take images of transactions, and those are stored securely in our database as well.
So still images or video?
Still images.
Okay. And are there any plans to add high security keys, to have more vetting? Every high security lock manufacturer issues magnetic stripe cards. They haven't gone to smart cards yet. That can be swiped through key machines. Are you looking at capturing that kind of information for at least the lowest level for high security locks for key duplication?
Currently, we're not doing any of that, but along with our ambition to really support as many key types as possible, it's certainly interesting to us. We would just need to make sure that we're doing it in a thoughtful way, which has been how we've approached everything else.
Where's your business going in the next 5 years? What do you foresee?
I mean, our goal is to become the dominant brand in this large space by being the most accurate, secure, convenient way to copy keys and to solve lockouts. And we've worked hard to get to this point. We've got a lot of work to accomplish that, but we believe that we've got a real path to get there, and it's going to come from continuing to make customers really, really happy and love us, and growing our footprint. The whole vision that we have is to improve the service quality in this space. And so everything that we do is informed by how to do a better job for our customers. And again, that goes back to the roots of starting this company, because my wife had such a poor experience that I think this is a really large offline service space that, from the service part, has not seen a lot of attention or innovation on how to improve the service component of the space. And that's really where we see a huge opportunity to do a better job.
Yeah. And where's your best market? New York?
So we're biggest in New York. We're starting to grow in most large major cities, but growing rapidly. We're deploying several kiosks every day, and it's been exciting to see the retail demand be really strong for our service, and customer demand, and so we're just heads down on execution.
And every one of these machines is online.
Online,
yeah,
the internet,
to here, yeah.
Right. So we have a cell modem inside every kiosk, so we are not dependent.
Oh, so you're not dependent on the location.
Right, for security reasons as well as logistics and other things.
So I guess the bottom line is there any negatives for the consumer to use your service?
I certainly don't think so. I think we're trying to do a better job than anyone else at providing these services. So convenience, accuracy, security, customer service. I think we are doing a superior job on all of those things than anyone else in the space.
Have you found, I guess last question, have you found, because I'm in Europe a lot where they have literally millions of different profiles. Have you run into problems where you really can't cut keys because you can't recognize or replicate the profiles?
Sure, yeah, it happens all the time. So, there are thousands of keys out there.
Millions of them.
Right, and we're very focused on those keys in the United States. But even within the United States, we're getting pretty far down sort of the popularity range, so we can support the vast majority of common keys.
Right.
But there are still, a high number of really uncommon keys that we are not able yet to do, and we're highly motivated to continue to support more and more keys over time so we can be more relevant.
When your system scans a key, if you don't have that blank, do you have the capability of milling? Are you doing that as well?
We are not currently. We've played around just for R&D purposes with 3D printing and other ways of creating blanks, but they're not currently being utilized. We are purchasing blanks and we're cutting those blanks and giving them to the customer.
How are you reading the keys in the machine? Are you using a laser? How are you doing that?
So
is it just a high-res video camera? What are you doing?
Yeah, it's with optics. So it's with cameras.
So not with precise laser measurement.
Correct.
So how are you reading Dimple keys? You did a multi-lock. I did a couple of multi-lock Dimple keys at your machine. But those are fairly simple compared to like some of them made in Switzerland, for example. How are you reading Dimple keys with any accuracy? Because you're talking about very difficult optics to decode.
Yep. So that's really the core of our technology has been to use imaging to identify and extract all the geometrical features of keys that we need. And so we're using imaging, computer vision, and then machine learning to go about that. And it's very robust at this point now that it's been trained by millions and millions of keys.
Right.
If it can't do it for some key that is less common or really tricky, we can sometimes have a human help train the machine and assist with it. But the artificial intelligence is getting very robust at this point, and able to do some things that are really incredible and superhuman levels of detection and other things. I mean, the reason that for a locksmith to be able to identify a key visually and compare it to all these millions of keys, as you said, it's a really tricky task for a human to do, because the geometric differences that distinguish all these key types are very subtle. And so that's actually a really interesting application for AI to be able to make these classification decisions that are challenging for a human, especially one that has less experience.
Yeah, for complicated keys. But when we were in high school, for example, we used to look at keys, duplicate, go home, make one, hand it to you, and it says, here's the key to your house. Yeah, we still do that, but not so much for the complex keys.
Sure.
Greg, thanks very much. This has been a pleasure visiting with you.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.